Alright.
Right there.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris and this is France. We're here to talk about the important questions of moral truth and if moral truths exist, and are there multiple moral truths or a singular moral truth, and just kind of unpack that a bit, as well as sample some of the finest hot sauces we could find. France, you want to talk to us about how this all started?
Yeah, so we regularly chat about nerdy stuff like this on Wednesdays, and on one of the Wednesdays we were talking about what we like to eat. And Chris has a sweet tooth. He said it's impossible for something to be too sweet. And I thought, no, at some point it starts hurting as sweet. And then I thought that's a bit hypocritical because I like chili sauces. And it turns out Chris also likes chili sauces. And so I said, let's do a chili challenge. And he was keen for it. And the initial set I recommended, he was smart enough to go read some internet reviews, and he responded to me, my only concern is this won't actually be hot. So I thought, game on Chris, let's get some sauces that are actually hot.
Alright, well, back to the scientific endeavor, and yes, France is right, and we will introduce these sources. I do think, finding moral truths has always been a bit of a project that I'm sympathetic to. I think, in a pragmatist view, it's weird taking an ideological idea and making it pragmatic, but I do think for people to live the best life, having moral truths that people can agree on is something that is very useful. But before we get into all that, I'd like to introduce our first source. France tells me that it is very mild. It is the Fynbox extra fruit pepper jam. And France, we have got forks, we want to touch our faces. Let's give this one a sample.
Let's just show for the people at home. We put a generous amount of sauce on there because we don't want to be like hot ones with just a tiny little speck. It's delicious. It doesn't burn that much.
It's like something you put on toast.
It's jam with some ginger and a hint, like a faint idea of chili. It's really nice.
Very faint idea. Mm-hmm. Very sweet. Something I put on my toast in the mornings, first thing in the morning. So maybe some chili in there, not much.
So the reason I brought that is because the level of hotness kind of escalated, as Chris said. No, I hope it should be actually hot. So I put a rule, like we should start no hotter than like African bird's eye chili sauce. And then I broke the rule and started way hotter than that.
We'll get to those in a moment.
So I thought I should also bring something that's actually in compliance with the rule. We agreed 3 sauces each. I brought 4, so that's my introduction.
So, France, tell me about your view of moral truth. Do they exist? Does a moral claim have any bearing in reality? Would you subscribe to moral truths, or are you more of a moral relativist?
So, it's a difficult thing to talk about because most of the words people use to talk about this stuff are concepts that are subject to philosophical controversy about what exactly they mean. So truth is like that, meaning is like that, and morality is like that. So like whatever word you kind of use to answer it can be interpreted in multiple ways, and it becomes difficult to talk about it. But one way in which I do think there are multiple truths is the sense that the word truth means different things to different people. And so like I just had a quick look at like the Stanford Encyclopedia article on truth, and there are several theories of what truth even is. So there's like the correspondence theory and the coherence theory and the pragmatist theory. And there are also philosophers who say like basically each of those theories describe different concepts. So if you're a correspondence theorist of truth, your concept of truth is literally a different thing than a coherence theorist of truth, and they have 2 different concepts, so they're talking about different things when they talk about truth. Yeah. And same with a pragmatist has a different notion of what truth is, and even within those, like there are different kinds of pragmatists. I kind of am sympathetic to pragmatism, but Peirce's pragmatism is different from William James's pragmatism, and in some context pragmatism doesn't make all that much sense. And I think pragmatism can be abused in some ways that I'm not comfortable with. So I think when it comes to moral things, there are moral claims that I will stand by in a kind of absolute way. Like, no, I will fight and kind of die for this is not right. But whether I want to call that truth or just like a conviction on my part, or So like what is truth and what is conviction, all that kind of stuff. Or whether I want to be able to claim that I have knowledge, that I really actually know that this thing I have conviction is wrong, or whether I want to just say like, yeah, it is a moral conviction of mine. So I have kind of absolutist moral convictions about some things. Like I think pedophilia is just outright wrong. I won't entertain people who try to argue. It's
don't worry, we aren't going to argue about pedophilia right or wrong.
Yeah. So there are some things I take kind of a monist stance on. Like I think that's wrong. That's not wrong. But it's complicated to say whether the truth is like it's an absolute truth or it's an absolute knowledge, because it depends what you mean by truth or what you mean by knowledge. And so I guess that's why philosophers spend careers having debates about this shit.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like getting bogged down in is truth, what is truth, how is truth, all of those things. I think from a standpoint of arguing moral truth is, does a moral claim have standing in reality? If I say it is wrong to kill, does that reflect in reality? Is it in the world? Is it actually wrong to kill? And I think that's a interesting way to look at it, because, and I guess it is a correspondence theory of truth that's saying I have a moral claim. Is it reflective in, and does it correspond to something in the real world? And I think most of us have convictions and things that like, I will absolutely not do that. But I think where it becomes difficult is that it's cultural truths. In some cultures, oppression of women is okay. In some cultures, it is not, and it's difficult. This kind of gray area between cultures. Is the oppression of women wrong? And we aren't going to argue that, but that is again, I'm sympathetic to creating moral truths or finding moral truths, but in a diverse world with diverse cultures and diverse beliefs, it does seem challenging, and everything does actually seem, I wouldn't say everything falls into moral relativism, but more of a bounded moral realism. I think at the end of these spectrums, pedophilia, nuclear war, etc., probably bad, but in the middle here, and this is where most of us live, I think it would be useful to find moral truths. But before we ramble on too much about that, Frans, you want to introduce our next sauce?
All right, so the next sauce is Nandos peri peri sauce, extra hot. So they have a whole series of sauces of different strengths, and I don't know how global the brand is, but they're quite a popular place that sells chicken and chip, fast food store, and they have their own branded sauces. And the chicken is usually way hotter than expected because they cook the chicken on the same grills that they. So if you buy lemon and herb from Nandos, you can bet it tastes a little bit like the sauce because it's got a little bit of the sauce on it. So Nandos is for people who like spicy chicken, and they make good spicy chicken sauce.
And I would like to point out that this is the hottest sauce that they make. So let's do that again. It's proof that there is a substantial amount of sauce on this vegan chicken nugget.
It's decolorized. Once we get to the ridiculous sauces, we're going to have to give each other time to appreciate each other's reaction to them. Yeah. One by one. I want to see you suffer. So I'm gonna.
Thank you. For an extra hot sauce, I find that incredibly mild.
You get used to hot sauces. You want to put it on record. Cressy reckons South Africans deal with hot sauces different than Americans, and Americans are pansy. And
I agree. Are you Americans out there? Pansies.
But that's probably the hottest sauce most Americans or most South Africans would consider buying. Like in most regular groceries or mom and pop stores, that's likely the hottest sauce you'd find. Maybe if you're lucky, you find like a Habanero Tabasco, but that's about as hot as most people in South Africa go.
So that's it. Nando's extra hot for your average American.
It's very vinegary, and the vinegar also kind of adds a little bit of heat. But the vinegar itself isn't that much hotter than the chili. The chili just kind of stays in your mouth a bit longer.
Quite nice, actually.
extra hot. Yeah, it's alright. So, yeah, about like women's rights and things. So at least from a relativist position, you can make objectively true relative accounts or relative claims. So you can say such and such feminist argued that it's an imperative for civilization that women be allowed to work the same as men and be paid the same as men. So you can make specific moral claims and attribute it to a specific moral theorist. Or you could say the Quran teaches women should be treated this way, or the Bible teaches women should be treated that way. And you can have arguments about the interpretation of what the Quran says, or what the Bible says, or what a theorist says, what any given law says. So like the constitutional law, Bill of Rights, is written at a level of almost these laws are just codifying moral laws. And so you can say the Constitution of South Africa says every person has a moral right and also a legal right to being treated with dignity. And other people can just may disagree with that. There are people who think like, no, my right to free speech is more important, or is so important that effectively your right to dignity is nullified, and I can say what I want even if that violates your dignity and insults you or whatever. In South Africa, it's a crime. You can be sued for crimen injure for insulting someone. I don't think many people ever get sued for being insulting, but technically you could.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Bill of Rights. I don't know, there are international organizations that attempt to codify a bunch of human rights, and I do look at those as kind of their attempt at establishing moral truths. You know, murder is wrong, genocide is wrong, these kind of things. And again, back to the pragmatist view, is that we can hold people to account on these moral laws, the Bill of Rights, etc. And it does kind of give us a bit of a system in which how we engage with each other. And I think the UN has the universal human rights and whatnot. And there are multiple. Obviously, there are multiple. Well, are these truths? Do they correspond with reality, or is it simply an attempt to govern? In my research, in reading about this 10 minutes before this video, it seems that a lot of people are critical of the idea of moral truth, in that it is simply a way for other people to control groups of other people. This is right, this is wrong. Please adhere to my worldview. Or simply that they are simply a product of emotion. This makes me feel guilty, therefore it is wrong. This makes me feel justified, therefore it is right. And I don't know, Franz, if you have any thoughts on the actual pragmatist notion of moral truth, if it is useful.
Yeah, I do. I just want to maybe make a point about these attempts to codify universal moral truths that are supposedly true for absolutely everyone anywhere. One of the things that a lot of theorists do who are more sympathetic to either relativism or nihilism even, or constructivism, or those kinds of things, make the point that there have been several attempts, like very many attempts, to codify universal moral codes, and they disagree with each other and about very fundamental things. Like it's not tiny little nitpicky differences. There are quite substantial disagreements about the most basic moral claims, and some people go straight from that to argue that seeing as those disagreements exist and after 2,000 years they still haven't been resolved, there are no such things as moral truth. I think it takes a bit more work to argue from disagreement to get to there are no moral truths. But from my point of view, it can become, I don't know of any way to objectively determine who in the disputing party is correct. So when it comes to scientific questions, there are research methods that I've been trained in and I've learned up on. If two scientists disagree with each other about how some system works or about what will happen if an experiment is run, they can do the experiment and measure what happens, and that'll settle the question. Whereas I don't know of any similar procedure for people who are disputing about a moral law. I don't know, like a kind of something analogous to an experiment that you just go do and then establish, all right, which of the two disputing parties is correct. it seems that traditionally the go-to thing was to appeal to authority. So the authority of a sacred text, or the authority of an international organization, or the authority of some kind. And who's to say the authority is correct?
Well, on that spicy note, I would like to introduce our next source. This is from Chickrn, the Forage and Feast Habanero. Does come highly recommended from a friend who I classify as a authoritative source in the realm of hot sauces. So Yashav, if you're watching, we're going to put this to the test. Commercially available, unlike some of these sources we'll be trying later, at your local Checkers.
All right.
All right, see, got some sauce on there. Proof.
Yeah. And I guess the light's a little awkward. Oh, it looks a bit strange on the screen there. Is it at least tasty?
It has a little more burn than the Nandos, but I don't think, as I quote my friend said, "You're about to get pussed, my boy." I don't think it's actually that hot.
It's going to be a boring show. Like,
Yeah, no.
Mr. Stoic over here is just going to be.
But I will have a sip of water.
It's chilly, but it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. I'm sweating a little bit from that one there, but very bearable. I can enjoy that. I think I'd have that over the Nandos extra hot.
I prefer the taste of habanero over the taste of bird's eye chili.
Okay, that is actually a bit of sweat there. Well, you seem to be taking a little bit of strain there.
Yeah. So the sweat's nice. Like my mouth feels hot, but then you start sweating and there's a bit of a breeze through the room, and so the forehead gets cool. So it's like this weird fire and ice thing going on. Cool forehead because of the sweat and burning lips.
Okay, well, I'm glad I made it past that one. That one was the one I was worried about. But I know it is only going to get worse. We have ordered these by how we perceive the heat is going to be.
Yeah, so definitely we got the order of these two correct, and I think these three are correct. I'm not sure about. Well, I mean, you can see what I'm pointing.
Yeah.
So, but we could talk about morality for a while before we.
Yeah. So I think to your points, the disputes between groups of people who don't subscribe to a governing law or a sacred text or whatever, how to resolve a dispute without being able to appeal to an authority of an international agreement or a sacred text, thou shalt not kill in the Bible, is very difficult. And I think without, it does take, really diving deep into the motivations and understandings of each group. And we can talk briefly about what's currently happening in Israel and Palestine after the October 7th attacks. That, there are certain people that did these attacks that were completely justified, that they were doing the right thing, that this was a moral good. And there is a group of people that think, no, this is a terrible idea. And this conflict puts it quite well, the need for, moral truths. And I'm very cynical of moral relativism when in Rome, do as the Romans do, even though it is not quite right. And even saying something as right or wrong, brings this whole example to the point that it is, they have to be, from a pragmatist view, a way that we can all get onto the same page about something, such as genocide or such as nuclear war or something. And I know it's a bit of a confusing point, but Franz, I'm hoping you can elucidate and thread the needle for us a bit there.
No, it's not confusing. I think that was quite clear. It's maybe just a little difficult to concentrate, right? Yeah, I think, I don't know if cynical is the right word. Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic. I don't think we'll ever reach a point where we can all get on the same page about those kinds of things. I mean, like even with the scientific method, there are ways to establish objective facts that are more or less settled and have been settled for a long time, and still people don't get on the same page about scientific questions. And so I think probably even if there were just plainly objective moral truths that could plainly be shown by reason or evidence or whatever, there would still be disagreement. That's why I think you need a bit of work to go from the fact that disagreement exists to argue that moral truths don't exist. That you need, like, disagreement in and of itself isn't enough, because I think there would be disagreement even if things were a lot easier like they are in the scientific domain, because there's also disagreement. So yeah, the Gaza thing is a terrible thing to talk about, but it's a good example to illustrate some of the things. So people can feel like there is just an objective fact about, like, say, whether Israel's response is or is not genocide. And from, say, a German may have a very strong association with genocide with the acts of the Third Reich, and just plainly Israel is not doing the exact same things as the Third Reich was, and it's just quite different to the stuff the Third Reich did. And so they think, no, genocide is the kind of thing the Third Reich did, and Israel's doing something different. It's like just very clearly not genocide. There's a different approach where you can say, like, well, there's a legal definition, and this would be like going the relativist route. You can say, like, there is an international genocide convention that defines what genocide is. Israel is a party to that genocide, so presumably they agree with the definition of what genocide is in there. And then you can ask a legal question: are the steps they've taken, has the way in which they've pursued the war violated the terms of that agreement? And that's likely a more objective way to do. But lots of people do dispute the legitimacy of the Genocide Convention and the International Court of Justice. So you could say, like, why should we care what the Genocide Convention says? How that definition may be incorrect. And someone else may have a different definition of genocide. And like similarly for pedophilia or for abuse or oppression or like whatever you want, like the definitions of at what point does this count as a moral transgression is at the same time, I think, an act of control. Like, moral laws and laws generally do have a regulatory function. They regulate how people behave, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Regulation in and of itself isn't necessarily bad. We need regulation. And then, but like also, it's sometimes just an expression of emotion, and it can be both of those things and mixed up. And it's also a question of how do we actually use language, like the definition of language. And people aren't always on the same page about, like, what is the definition of genocide? What is the definition of oppression? And so you can say you're committing genocide, and just like, no, by definition, that's objectively false. But then, like, deciding what definition to use itself has moral weight or has moral consequences if you decide to define genocide one way versus define genocide as another way, has substantive moral implications, because often these words that have these strong moral implications, like the first kind of thought that comes to people to define it is like a morally objectionable version of something. So if you're fighting a war, that's bad and everything, but if you're going in a moral step too far into like exterminating a people, that's genocide. And then people can disagree about the moral fact of whether Israel has gone, or any other party has gone, that moral extra step too far in the way they're waging their war. And I think if you want to say, well, because different people use different definitions, and because there are different laws that govern different people, and because there are different sacred texts, and they all claim to be the ultimate universal authority over all people for all time, if you're going to take the relativist route, you kind of have to accept there are multiple relativist truths in existence, and you might want to argue, well, one of them is the correct one, but I don't know a way to decide which one is the correct one. So like deciding which authority to accept as the one authority, I don't know how to settle that. I do know to see, like, well, there are multiple claimants to the authority. And so I can say that from the Genocide Convention, there is a moral truth that arguably that Israel is committing genocide, although the court hasn't decided that yet. And maybe from a German point of view, understanding of what genocide is, the moral truth is not Israel is not committing genocide. And maybe from like a different point of view, it could be somewhere in between. Or some countries may have not one word for genocide, but have like 4 words, and they have like overlapping meanings with genocide and war crimes and stuff in the ways that we in English don't have. And then their moral truth about what's going on in Israel would be quite different, or they'd speak differently about it in a way that might make sense and might be reasonable and not morally objectionable necessarily.
Yeah, and I mean, so I would argue, and at the risk of going too far down this Israel-Palestine, South Africa case, this, South Africa and Israel are party to some kind of agreement or convention, and again, it's the appeal to authority that, these are the definitions that we have agreed upon what genocide are, and we signed some kind of treaty. But even within that framework, there is still dispute. But I think it's time for our next source, another one that I have chosen. This one from the Korean shop. I don't really know what it says, but I do know it's the same one that is in the 3 times spicy noodles. A little bit worried, especially because of the chicken breathing fire out of that. So let's jump straight into the next one, and then the ones after this are the real problems that I'm worried about.
Are the ones that I made sure are actually hot. Yeah, there's definitely a
fair amount,
a generous amount of sauce on these wings. That's the color they have underneath, and they're red, just drenched in sauce.
It just tastes like chicken.
It's chicken stock with extract in, right?
Very disappointing. Thank goodness we have the big guns up next.
Alright. Yeah, we've mistaken this order because we didn't know what to expect. But this one is definitely milder than the Nandos.
Yeah. Koreans, pussies also.
How would you say? It's actually similar to the jam, I'd say.
Yeah.
In heat. Maybe our taste buds have just taken a knock and we can't tell the difference anymore. Put them in order, so we'll do a shot at the end of all the sauces we try.
Cool. So before we jump into the next one, if there were only one moral truth, would this be some kind of overarching, some kind of magical truth that would be applicable to every decision in someone's life? Or would it be something as simple as don't kill, but everything else, figure it out relativistically?
So from my side, like I only really know one principle that I'd say would qualify as at least an abstract moral truth that's universal, and it's kind of a little bit like in programming when you do abstract classes and you haven't implemented anything yet. So you can kind of define a name for it and say what needs to happen, but like the details of how that's supposed to happen are very problematic, and I think it's unlikely that it ever will happen. But there's my favorite economist ever, and I recently talked to a actuary who says economics is useless, and I mostly agree, but there are some economists that I do think made some interesting. My favorite economist is Wilfredo Pareto, and he had this notion of optimality when you're trying to optimize multiple objectives at the same time, of one thing being strictly better than something else. And basically the notion is, if you can evaluate something across multiple dimensions, so that might be in the moral domain, you want to honor your parents, but you also need to take care of your children, and your parents are doing something bad for your children, or they want to do something bad, and they'll feel insulted and dishonored if you don't allow them, but you also want to take care of your children. So just like one ethical dilemma. And most really difficult ethical dilemmas, and the trolley problem is the one that comes up often. It's a silly ethical dilemma, but it's illustrative of the like general thing that happens, is there'll be multiple moral concerns that are in place simultaneously, and people struggle weighing them off against each other, and typically people dislike having to weigh off multiple moral concerns against each other. But so the Pareto efficient principle says that a thing is better if on all of the concerns, like all of the criteria against which you can evaluate something, the alternative is either better or at least as good as another alternative, then we can objectively say the strictly dominating alternative is better than the dominated alternative. And if you're making decisions, dominated alternatives shouldn't be even considered as options. You should just throw them out of your feasible region and you just ignore they exist because they're objectively very obviously mistakes. And no one I know has ever argued that no, dominated alternatives are okay. Like sometimes it's fine, go for a dominated alternative. Everybody's like, if you have some procedure or some decision-making process that leads you to picking dominated alternatives, that's an error that absolutely must be corrected. And as far as I can tell, everybody's on board with that. There's no disagreement about that. But then the details that aren't implemented is what are the moral criteria that are relevant for each decision. And probably we can't make a list of literally every single criteria that matters. So whenever we make real decisions, we're going to have like a short list of things we pay attention to and things we ignore. And we may end up picking quite different options depending on which subset of criteria we focus on. But yeah, I think don't pick strictly dominated alternatives is, as far as I've read so far,
a good moral truth.
Is about like a moral law as good as any science law. Like I think that holds up about as well as the standard model of physics, probably better even than the standard model of physics. So I think that's solid, but it's not immediately practical. Like there was a professor who worked in evolutionary multi-objective optimization techniques, and he said typically for applied problems, if you have a feasible set of things you can consider and you apply the principle of removing or eliminating dominated alternatives, you're left with about 85 or 89% of your original set. So you're just removing a tiny percent of absolutely objectively mistakes that shouldn't be considered, and then you still have this massive set of possible solutions that you don't have an objective way to say which one is better. So yeah, that could be a problem. So the next one, we don't have to worry about that much. I have tried this one. It is Master Chilli Creations XXX Hot and Tasty. And I chose this one because of all the sauces I looked at, it's the only one with some fruit in it. It's meant to sound delicious. It's got mangoes and peach in it. And I thought that sounds like it might be a sweet chili. And I really like sweet chili sauce. And so far the only sweet one we've had is the jam. And so I was hoping this one would be sweet. I have tasted it. It's not all that sweet. It's quite bitter, actually. So, but it has ghost peppers, scorpion peppers, spot peppers, Carolina Reaper peppers in it. So it burns.
I think we're finally stepping up into the major league with this one.
Yeah, don't expect too much. Like it hurts to eat, but it's nothing crazy.
This last Korean one it didn't taste hot going down, but I definitely feel like
it lasted
left it a bit of a. Anyway,
it's hotter than the jam.
Let's do this one. It's tasty.
Compared to the Nandos sauce, it's much tastier.
Yeah. I'd actually rather have that over the Nandos. It's definitely a much more flavorful. But also, I wouldn't say it's hot.
So, yeah, I'm not so sure it's much hotter than the Habanero sauce.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same ballpark as the Checkers bought. Maybe a little bit hotter than that.
I don't know. Something they don't do is they don't tell you how much percentage of this. This is 32% habanero. And if that's only like 1% Carolina Reaper, they can put it on the label. And 1% Carolina Reaper isn't going to burn that much. Somehow the aftertaste gives you a better sense of how hot it is. It does.
Let's put on. It's quite nice. Master Chilli Creation.
So I've never seen this in a regular supermarket, but it's available online. That's what Chris was on about. But like, all these are commercially available. Like, no, I have to go look online for some of these.
In my defense, I've just walked into stores and bought these, whereas Franz went and scoured the internet for the hottest stuff he could possibly find.
I just dislike walking around in stores. I usually buy stuff online.
Fair enough. Anything else about moral truth that you'd like to, any kind of open points of discussion?
I don't know. I think I sort of said most of the stuff I have to say about moral truths. I think when people make moral claims, they can be playing different kinds of games. So sometimes it's a manipulative kind of game to try to control people. Sometimes it's more of a negotiating thing where the idea is not to absolutely just take control of someone and manipulate them, but where it's kind of setting boundaries of these are the things I will allow and these are the things I won't allow, and if we can't operate in a way that we're both comfortable with.
That sauce was actually pretty hot.
Somehow it takes a while.
It's getting hotter now.
It takes a while.
Sorry.
my nose is funny. And sometimes people are just expressing like disdain or disgust or moral indignation, and they don't mean to control anyone directly or even to negotiate. They're just, kind of expressing emotion. So I think, and sometimes people are having intellectual fights. They just, I prove me wrong. I say the following, and they don't really care about expressing emotions or manipulating anyone. They're just playing a game of being right. And that's what, I think a lot of philosophers are kind of in that game of trying to be right.
I think so.
Stuff, so they make moral arguments for that reason. And yeah, so at the level of communication, different things can be going on when people make moral claims. And in some of those cases, like truth makes sense. In some of those cases, the notion of truth is a little bit more slippery. Like, is it true that we should continue to eat the sauces that are even hotter than the one we just had? Or is it false? And does it even make sense to say truth or false regarding that should? Like, do claims of what we should do and shouldn't do have truth values? And some people argue no, they don't have truth values. Some people say yes, they do have truth values. And then those who argue they do have truth values, among them some are correspondent theorists and some are coherence theorists and some are pragmatists. And so what it means to have a truth value is different for those people. So at least just in a, if you look as a sociologist or anthropologist and you look at people and they're talking about moral truths, I think it's fair to say they're talking about lots of different kinds of things.
Yeah, and this is also my kind of cynicism with more of the kind of armchair philosophy, is that it is, to me at least, does seem a lot of I'm better than you. I've decided what these rules are, and you're breaking them. And I've developed a framework. Whereas, I mean, a lot of that, a lot of philosophy just creates more philosophy that we can sit and dispute right and wrong, and then create schools of thought of how to argue about right and wrong. And I think a lot of philosophy has simply become a way to parse these arguments instead of, bring it back to day-to-day life. Should we eat more hot chicken nuggets or should we stop there? Is it morally right to continue, which I think we should do?
I think we should, but I think it's morally irrelevant whether we do it or not.
Droplets of sweat forming just as I look at these ones.
Yeah.
What is the next one we've got there?
The next one we've got is from Blair's.
Yeah, I think you have to show the camera this one. It actually says
Ultra Death Sauce.
Yes, it's got a skull on it.
It came with it was in the wrap. It came with a keyring with a skull on it. All of the Blair sauces do that. But of the general lineup, this is the hottest one. And it also has Habanero chilies is the main thing. But it has natural pepper flavor, which is an extract, which is the thing
It's a breeze, that's nice.
cools off the sweat nicely. So yeah, are we going to do this one by one? And if so, who goes first? Or are we going to do it at the same time?
Up to you.
After me.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna not react. I'm just gonna sit here and sweat, and then make my friend over here look like a baby if he cries about how hot it is, even though I'm dying inside because of how hot it is. Well, I'll complain about the heat a bit later, but it tastes a lot like Tabasco sauce. Like really fucking hot Tabasco.
So hot Tabasco sauce, you say?
Yeah, that's definitely hotter than the previous one we took.
It's like very hot Tabasco sauce. I taste the vinegar, but it doesn't really seem to be any redeeming qualities in terms of flavor. It's just hot and sour and unpleasant. Yeah. Okay, that's a real hot sauce, boys and girls.
Made in the USA, so they do go.
Okay. Hot damn.
That's actually hotter than I expected.
Woo! And it's one of those ones where it just gets worse.
Hiccups, yeah. So, you were worried they're not actually hot. I think that one counts as actually hot.
Oh, it's fucking hot. Ugh. Good lord. So, moral truth, you say?
Moral truth, yeah.
Woo!
I don't know if it's a moral question, but at some point, a sauce is too hot.
I think it should be illegal to make a sauce that hot. Oh, water is not helping.
Yeah. And there's
More.
people get used to hot sauces, so like some people have reactions like we're having to like the Nandos sauce. So everybody reacts differently to hot sauces. But like one of the people who reviewed this hot sauce was like, it's hot, but it's not like the hot stuff. Like the really hot stuff, if you want to go for that one, you need to go for the one we're going up
I need
next.
more water.
If you want to chicken out, there's some oats that you can have. That'll 100% help. I know that.
Let's see this. That's a with a Jersey Fury. I wish I could uneat that. I've made bad decisions. Woo! You seem to be taking this quite well.
I mean, it hurts, but you know. That's kind of. I was honestly expecting this one to hurt that much.
No, that one was great. That one's delicious.
Yeah.
That one was terrible.
So there's at some point
It's contraband. That should be illegal.
where just the whole mouth is in so much pain, like it's difficult to tell whether you're bleeding or not.
Like, is my mouth bleeding? It feels like my mouth is bleeding. Like now I feel like going to the UN to get a binding resolution
We need a ceasefire.
to send a cease and desist to the manufacturers of Blair. We'll take Blair to the ICJ. Okay. Woo! All right. It's subsiding. Okay. We do still have one more. But to be honest, I've run out of things to say about moral truth, but I'm not ready to eat that next one.
Okay, so we can talk about something else, I guess. So, like, one thing we can talk about is some interesting thing we brought up in a previous discussion about moral truth. Is that sometimes people bring up this, like, well, that's your truth. My truth is the way I've been abusing you has nothing wrong with it. And that can really shut down a conversation. So we've kind of been talking in an abstract, like what would it mean to be morally true, and different theories of what truth is, and different frameworks for morality, like international law and all that kind of thing. But if you're dealing with a family member or a partner or a friend who's being abusive, or a colleague or a boss or whatever, and you try to negotiate them to do something else, and they basically invalidate your complaints. So you could be suffering some kind, or you could be very uncomfortable with, say, transgressing something that in your conviction is morally not okay. And a way for some people to shut that down is to just be like, well, that's your moral conviction, that's your moral truth. My moral truth says what I'm doing is perfectly fine. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do. It's your problem to fix how you feel about what I do. Don't try to control me.
Yeah, and that's where my sympathy for creating moral truths comes from, because down to the real world and interactions with other people, that person A is being abusive and person B says, you're being abusive, but person A says, no, but this is my truth. I feel that this is the way it should be and things should be, and this is true, and I'm going to continue doing it. And you need to accept my truth in this. And it's not that far removed from, case in point, the Israeli-Gaza conflict, in that a terrorist group attacked Israel, and very justified in why they did this and all of that. And Israel says, this is wrong, and proceeded with, some may argue, an outsized retaliation. And the example is that, no, the Palestinians have been oppressed, and now they're continuing to be oppressed, and this is the truth that is purported continually. And the same to personal relationships, is that I behave in a way that is detrimental to your well-being, but when you retaliate, you're now invalidating my truth. And it's a repulsive idea. I really hate this validation that people seem to expect just because of their beliefs in something. And that's why I think moral truths that we can all get behind and agree on, it's even burning in my stomach, is something that all pragmatists should strive to achieve. And it's not as simple as like, let's all just be friends, let's all just get along, especially when we don't have a framework on how to treat each other based off of some kind of truths that we can agree on.
So I think when good faith breaks down that way, when people, or when the moral disagreement is absolute and both parties are claiming absolute moral authority, and they're at odds with each other, so they get into a fight. I don't like the saying that might makes right, because I don't think might makes right. But like on a practical level, the way those things usually get solved is the strong people do what they can to get it their way, and weak people suffer what they must because they're weak. So I think that's more or less the way the world goes. So often there's mutual interests that can be drawn upon in discussions and negotiations to try to find common ground, and often like mutually assured destruction is not. Nobody wants to go that way. Or mutual destruction is not something that's good for anyone. But yeah, I think a lot of the ways those things get settled is by the application of some kind of force.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like more subtle force, it's like regulations and the threat of firing someone, or the threat of leaving someone, divorcing someone, or it's kind of implied threats that aren't always super violent, so people aren't always bleeding or burning or dying.
And I think that is, again, a bit of an appeal to authority in the sense. And I like the idea of a truly benevolent dictator. I think, appealing to the International Court of Justice, which actually has very little they can do if they were to order that Israel stop everything. They don't have to, but I think, they have to, but they don't.
Nobody's going to
reality.
If they decide not to, nobody's going to stop them.
Correct. And I do think another point of discussion is this idea of the world policeman, and I think a lot of people, especially in the global south, look at the US as this kind of benevolent dictator, I guess, and if they can probably enforce something if they feel it is wrong, either through economic mechanisms or military mechanisms. So that is something that we can also put as a more of an appeal to all authorities. If we have a disagreement, is that this big guy can enforce that, and essentially they make these rules in a way.
Yeah, well, so I don't know if it's an appeal to authority for being right, but like societies have police forces and militaries for a reason. It's not just because people are too stupid to know that violence is bad. Um, it's just like sometimes violence escalates, something bad is happening. And yeah, I think the power to exert violence and exert coercive control kind of naturally conglomerates because everyone's looking for the next biggest dog to fight to protect them, or like some people aim to be the next biggest dog so that they can be sure that they get it their way. And so there's these fights for power, and like little chieftains become kingdoms, and kingdoms become empires, and empires become the United States of America, or whatever. But yeah, so probably why I doubt that we'll ever see something like just global peace with no more violence, and why some religions that take a very hard stance on absolute non-violence don't make any sense to me. Because of all the religions I know, the one that takes the hardest stance on non-violence and like you should never be violent, basically ends up having the monks try to follow that will commit violence against themselves. In like many ways, like I would consider I would feel violated having to live the lifestyle of a Jain monk. And I'm pretty sure my health would suffer as well. So I'd be materially violated to live that kind of lifestyle, and it's in the service of trying to make like the utmost principle like absolute non-violence. So I don't think that works. So I think some moral disputes get resolved by some kind of violence, where they don't get resolved by appeals to truth at all. And so I think a lot of what philosophers do when they talk about truth is really just bickering. And probably like say a public process, like taking a country to court, has maybe somewhat more substantial impact than like your typical philosopher. But some philosophers have quite a big reach as well.
So I know we seem to be avoiding the inevitable here with the final hot sauce.
Procrastinating.
Yeah, the last one was pretty bad, but I think I've recovered. Why don't you tell us what this next sauce is?
So the next one is The Bomb Beyond Insanity. And got this because watched the show Hot Ones that this whole exercise was quite inspired by. And it was usually at place number 7, but just judging by people's reactions, it was clearly the hottest sauce on the table every time. And it officially has a rating of only 135,000 Scoville heat units. So you wouldn't think it's that hot if you just go by the Scoville heat units.
Is it more than that one that I just had?
So let me just give you an idea, right? So this is supposedly 135,000, right? But like this sauce that's made out of ghost chili peppers.
No, I mean this one that really killed me.
So I'll get to your answer your question in a moment. This one like has several peppers. The mildest pepper in the Master Chili's creation is ghost peppers, which are supposedly 1 million Scoville heat units. Okay. And this was very clearly not nearly as hot as this.
Okay.
Right, and like on only one review did I get someone who directly compared this one to this one, and they said this one is way hotter than that one.
Way hotter or a little bit hotter?
Well, they didn't use the word way or a little. They just said
hot.
This one's hot, but it's not the hot stuff. So if you want the hot stuff, you go to that's not you. If you really want to burn. So there was one person who said like, yeah, it's a hot sauce, but it's not actually hot. The one that's actually hot.
All right, well, let's do it then, shall we? Let me just get this glass of water ready.
Yeah, it's going to hurt. Is that like your 3rd glass of water?
It's not like my 7th.
Okay, so just as a point, excessive amounts of water is also a laxative. So just
good to know.
Take that into consideration.
I feel like mine's got a lot more sauce in it, but it's fine.
You put the sauce, bro. It's tastier than the first one, or the last one.
No, it's not.
I prefer the taste of this. Smoky.
It's starting. Smoky. Weird.
There we go.
I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's still one of those ways.
Yeah,
Or maybe it has a delayed effect.
You did only put about half as much of this one as this one.
It's hard. I get it.
The wing we ate with this one, I suffered more than this one.
It's getting hotter.
Yeah, but still. So, Mr. Reviewer, this one may cause me more suffering than this one.
Yeah, the bomb is it's nasty. But not like that thing.
Yeah.
It's still hot though.
Yeah, so we'll fix the order. We got them in the wrong order.
Alright, yeah, let's try and put an order.
So, that one is by far the mildest, hardly any chili. It's about as hot as ginger. Not hot at all. This one tastes like chicken stock that has like a aftertaste of you might have had chili. I'm in pain right now, so
It's getting hotter.
it's slower to come on than Auto Death, but you know what I think it is, like you put way more of this on and the amount of sauce in your mouth actually makes a difference for how quickly it comes on. So you were scared of this one, and you only put about half as much.
Because I've seen the show Hot Ones and everyone hates that one.
Everybody does hate that one. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Buldak, Korean one. It was second hottest. Then there's Nandos Peri Peri hot sauce, which is an African bird's eye chili sauce, which is quite hot, but it's edible. Man, that hurts.
They could stop.
It's not gonna stop for a while.
Cannot drink any more water.
Yeah, it will make you go run to the door. And then
Let's make the pain stop.
the next one was the Forage and Feast Habanero sauce.
I like that one.
It was quite delicious, but I honestly prefer the Master Chili Creations.
Delicious also.
And then these two, I think, are similar.
A death.
They're the Hot Death. We had them in this order. So the Bomb and Ultra Death Sauce. The Bomb is definitely slower coming up, but I'm in a similar amount of pain right now than I was earlier.
I still, yeah, it's not nice. Well, there you have it, boys and girls. I think my favorite sauce that I think I would use is probably this one. The one I would avoid
Both of these.
is this one, well, both of those. And the thing I would consume casually on a daily basis would probably be this Forage and Feast. Any closing points?
No, I'm happy with that.
Our record time. Woo! Thanks for watching.